You can begin.
All right, well, welcome back, everyone. We had a really wonderful past 2 days with some really healthy conversation. So just, it's real. I was thinking we haven't spent this much time together in quite a long time. So this is our third meeting this week. So just want to go, I know we have a lot to cover today, so I'm just going to jump right in. So Ms. Tanner will go ahead and certify the meeting, verify certification of the meeting. So Ms. Tanner, has today's school board meeting been properly certified?
Yes, Madam Chair. On April 20th, 2020, notice was provided fulfilling all criteria VA Code Chapter 37.
Thank you, Ms. Tanner. I duly call this meeting to order. Okay. First thing, I want to let each of the school board members know that I sent a link for the executive meeting that we're having today. I apologize that it was so late. We had some technical difficulty, but it should be in your inbox. Okay. Let's see. Ms. Tanner, would you please call the roll?
Ms. Basine?
Here.
Campson? I think you're muted.
Yeah, here.
Mr. Clanton?
Present.
Brooke?
Present.
Jordan?
Here.
Smith?
Here.
Thank you. And Martin?
Here. Okay, thank you, Ms. Tanner. And at this time, I'd like to turn the meeting over to Dr. Sharon Birdsong to discuss our first presentation, which is the results and recommendation for the reopening of our schools this fall. So please take it away, Dr. Birdsong.
Good afternoon, Mrs. Martin, Mr. Jordan, members of the school board, and members of our community. Fresh from the school board's 2-day retreat, I have to say that I am invigorated and encouraged by the substantive conversation that took place over the past 2 days. Our agenda this afternoon certainly reflects our hard work as the board takes another look at our governance norms and protocols, as well as the school board's code of ethics that we discussed during the retreat. I am encouraged about what the new year holds because these documents provide a framework for the collaborative work of the governance team. And indeed, we certainly have some extremely important work ahead of us. All of us appreciate the fact that Norfolk Public Schools business is conducted in a very public manner. Sometimes the nature of our agenda items is so compelling that we may have many interested parties paying close attention to the leadership dialogue. This afternoon's agenda is certainly such an example because we will be examining a high interest issue, and that is school reopening options. But before we begin our formal meeting, I'd like an opportunity to speak to our community for just a moment. And I must emphasize the word options here. I know many of you are eager to have answers to pressing questions such as, will my children be going back to a traditional school year? If not, what days will they be attending school? Will there be a virtual option because I'm not comfortable sending my child back to school during a pandemic? And also, how will the education of the most vulnerable children of Norfolk Public Schools be addressed? We will not be sharing final decisions this afternoon for several reasons. For one, guidance from the governor's office, the Virginia Department of Health, the Virginia Department of Education, and other agencies continues to evolve as conditions change. And yes, there's the very real chance that guidance may change again in the coming weeks. Based on the governor's most recent community briefing, it's anticipated that guidance will change. In addition, the logistics involved in any and all options are just absolutely tremendous, and this certainly will impact final decision making. We will be sharing this afternoon different avenues on how we might deliver educational services to our almost 30,000 students. Chief Academic Officer, Dr. James Pohl, Chief Information and Instructional Technology Officer, Dr. Michael Cataldo, and Chief Schools Officer, Dr. Linnell T. Gibson will walk us through these detailed scenarios, laying the groundwork for what I am sure will be a lively and substantive school board discussion. Also, I want to briefly address another matter before I turn the floor back over to the chairman. This matter involves special education services, particularly how the school division addressed IDEA meetings during the mandated closure of schools. As you are aware, our school board attorney had advised the administration in some instances that staff should postpone meetings during the mandated closure. Again, please be advised that the division did convene some of these meetings virtually during the school closure when the legal purpose for the meeting could be fulfilled, and postponed when there was an inability to access critical records and data to hold these meetings. And certainly there was an inability to conduct face-to-face evaluation due to safety concerns for students, parents, guardians, and staff related to the pandemic. IDEA meetings that were held during the mandated school closure included, but were not limited to, extended school year programming, meetings for students with disabilities who were transitioning to the next level of schooling, for example, from pre-K4 to kindergarten, elementary school to middle school, and from middle school to high schools or high school. Meetings were also held for students attending private day schools, residential facilities, and CSEP, and those involving postgraduate candidates, as well as students who were aging out of special education programs, requiring referrals and support for postgraduate opportunities. A letter addressed to our parents and guardians regarding the status of IDEA meetings, as well as information related to available resources for our students with disabilities, was disseminated via multiple means during the mandated school closure. And at this time, Dr. Glenda Walter, who is the newly appointed Senior Director of Learning Support, Special Education Services, she's working with her staff to reschedule and conduct meetings throughout the summer that were postponed during the closure. Additionally, Dr. Walter recently disseminated another newsletter to our parents and guardians, introducing herself and informing them of the efforts of her team to reschedule postponed meetings. The bottom line is, in the near future, parents and guardians will have dates for such meetings. We thank our parents and guardians for their continued support and patience, and hope that this information addresses any lingering concerns. Chairman Martin, that concludes my remarks. Thank you. And so if you would like, we can go right into our presentation of reopening options.
Yes, please do, Dr.
Okay, so again, I'd like to introduce to you our newly appointed Chief Academic Officer, Dr. James Pohl, as well as Dr. Mike Cataldo, who is serving as our Chief Information and Instructional Technology Officer, and Dr. Linnell Gibson, Chief Schools Officer, with our plans for the reopening of the fall 2020. Dr. Pohl.
All right, thank you, Dr. Birdsong. Good afternoon, Chairwoman Martin, Vice Chair Jordan, members of the board, and Dr. Birdsong. I'm James Pohl, the newly appointed Chief Academic Officer, and this afternoon, as Dr. Birdsong mentioned, I'm here with Dr. Mike Cataldo and Dr. Linnell Gibson to present options for the fall of 2020 reopening of schools. As you're aware, the governor has left this decision to local school boards, with a major consideration being the spread of COVID-19 within the locality. In Governor Northam's press conference yesterday, he specifically called out Hampton Roads for having a 10.1% positivity rate, with the statewide average being 6.8%. And as noted in the Virginia pilot yesterday, Norfolk has seen an increase to a 16.7% positivity rate. As we work to develop final plans, it is necessary for us to keep these figures in consideration. In the presentation this afternoon, we'll review data from the parent survey, the phase 3 restrictions and considerations, the VDOE instructional plan requirements, 4 opening possibilities, as well as the logistics needed, variance information, and next steps. Earlier this month, a survey was sent to parents to glean information about their thoughts around school reopening in the fall. Nearly 9,000 parents responded, amounting to above a 30% response rate. However, some parents who responded have multiple students. The question we will be reviewing today is, if you had an elementary school child or children, please respond to this question with him or her in mind. Each of the following scenarios limit the number of students that will be physically attending school on any one day. Please indicate your preference for your elementary school child or children's schedule in the fall. Check all that apply. Parents could have chosen multiple answers within each group, and the question was repeated for each leveling of school. The answer choices for the question can be seen in the red box. They had choices such as from 1 day per week, 2 days per week, 4 days a week on a split schedule, every other week fully online, and they're not planning to send their student to Norfolk Public Schools. Specific to our elementary students, there were 3,615 responses, representing 16% of the elementary student population. As you can see within the red boxes, the majority chose 4 days a week, then fully online, then 2 days per week, with a range between the first and third options of 14%. For our middle school students, there were 2,615 responses, representing nearly 32% of the middle school population. Again, with the red box, you'll see the first choice is 4 days per week. Next was fully virtual, with 2 days a week coming in third. Here, there was only a 9% range between the first and third choice. The high school students had 2,768 responses, representing nearly 36% of the high school student population. They had the same top three with only an 8% range between the first and third choice. Finally, it's important to note that 25 to 26% of our population may be interested in being fully online with the NPS Virtual Scholars Academy. This topic will be covered later in the presentation. Overwhelmingly, parents and guardians who chose to offer an alternative suggestion were requesting a full day, full week of school for students, as we were prior to March 13th, 2020. Some of the restrictions and considerations that have to be considered are outlined on this slide. Now that we're in phase 3, all students are allowed to return to school while following social distancing requirements created by the CDC. As we look to return to school, we need to consider our most vulnerable students, including our youngest learners, pre-K to 3, our students with special needs, our English language learners, and our students with the greatest gaps in their learning. As a point of notice, at the end of the school year, approximately 16% of our students received a grade of incomplete, meaning they were not engaged during the COVID shutdown and most likely have the highest levels of learning gaps. Please know we've hired teachers to reach out to and to work with these students over the summer in order for them to be successful in completing this work and moving to the next grade or course level. Another consideration on the slide is making sure we keep our students and staff healthy. Therefore, we need to ensure time for cleaning our schools and buses, the limitations we will have with transportation by only having 1 student per seat, and the updated phase guidance for 3 to 6 feet is allowable. Staff members who may not be able to teach face-to-face due to health matters, and the time and effort needed to ensure students and staff health assessments and screenings, as well as all safety precautions are in place. Ms. Tanner, go ahead. Thank you. While keeping all of this in mind, there are 4 areas we will need to have detailed plans for the required instructional plan that will have to be submitted to the VDOE at least 15 days prior to the opening of school. Operational infrastructure to support learning. This part of the plan is for school schedules, transportation, technology, processes, systems, communications, and the like to ensure we're able to fulfill the needs of our reopening plan. New instruction for all students. This part is what we will do to provide new instruction to all of our students, including the learning needs of all students equitably, with attention to the vulnerable and special populations, preparing teachers through professional development, robust family engagement, and communication with stakeholders. Identification of instructional gaps and student needs. This part of the plan is to detail the identification of learning needs through formative assessment, supports for student success and well-being, revisions to curriculum pacing and instructional delivery, and remote learning. This part is the development of a contingency plan for ensuring continuity of instruction should further closures be necessary. Throughout the process that has taken place to create possibilities for reopening to school in the fall, students have remained the center of the conversation. Meeting their needs educationally is paramount while ensuring the safety of our community. The priorities have been focused on the health and safety of students, staff, and the community, instructional implications, resources available, and the feasibility of possible opening scenarios. At this time, I'll turn the presentation over to Dr. Gibson to review the reopening possibilities.
Good afternoon, Chairwoman Martin, Vice Chair Jordan, members of the board, and Dr. Birdsong. I'm Linnell Gibson, Chief Schools Officer. I will be sharing 3 reopening possibilities and factors to consider for each of the 3 possibilities. It is important to note the following recommendations are tentative, and they can be influenced by changing health and safety guidelines. In reopening possibility 1, each student in grades K through 12 will go to school and receive face-to-face instruction 2 days each week and engage in virtual learning 3 days each week. Students will be as evenly divided as possible to maintain building capacity of 50% and attend school in Group A or Group B. Group A will attend school Mondays and Tuesdays. Group B will attend school Thursdays and Fridays. Each Wednesday, students will work from home while our most vulnerable students will attend school up to 5 days a week based on their learning needs. As we do this each Wednesday, our teachers will also engage in professional development, planning, and feedback to students on their progress. With possibility 1, we have to consider before and after childcare needs for students, as well as childcare needs for some middle school students on the days they're at home. We have to consider how to make transportation work for all routes and staggers in the mornings and afternoons. Since we will expect students to complete learning assignments virtually during the 3 days they're at home, we will also need to ensure students have mobile devices and access to Wi-Fi. As appropriate, distancing, social distancing, use of masks, and other health and safety precautions will be in place as they are developmentally appropriate. In reopening possibility 2, we will have our elementary school students attending school each day. Half of the students will attend in the morning, the other half will attend in the afternoon. Our middle and high school students will still have 2 days of learning face-to-face in school and 3 days of virtual learning experiences each week. Please note in reopening possibility 2, elementary school students will attend every day face-to-face on what we are calling a modified schedule, where half the student body attends in the morning and the other half in the afternoon. We will continue with our most vulnerable students attending up to 5 days per week as needed. In terms of our considerations logistically, we have to be mindful that transportation will be most challenging in this model. Cleaning challenges will also exist between shifts, and they will need to be resolved. Childcare for late arrivals and early dismissal may present concerns for families, and we'll also have to consider the challenge of the continued childcare needs for some of our middle schoolers. In reopening possibility number 3, we want you to know that this is our traditional school program that has always existed. It is a 100% face-to-face every day on the traditional model in elementary school and the AB block calendar in the high schools. In this particular model, we would have to assume the risk of having 100% capacity in our buildings face-to-face in a traditional setting. And we'll also embrace the traditions we've always known with the school day. However, this decision will require that we continue to monitor and adjust as needed based on the state guidance, the Center of Disease Control, the Virginia Health Department, securing variances as needed, and seeking and following legal counsel. We need to be mindful in possibility 3 that this presents challenges that may endanger our students and staff. Transportation will not be able to transport over 12,000 students and on a daily basis and maintain the 3 to 6 feet distance between students. Crowding in halls and common areas in our buildings would not allow for the required social distancing. Our risks for transmitting COVID-19 would increase to the rate where this plan may not be viable. At this time, I'm going to turn over the presentation to Dr. Cataldo, who will present to review our 4th possibility, the Norfolk Public Schools Virtual Scholars Academy.
Thank you, Dr. Gibson. Chairwoman Martin, Vice Chair Jordan, members of the board, and Dr. Birdsong, thank you. I'm excited to talk about the NPS, Norfolk Public Schools Virtual Scholars Academy. Since the shutdown and being forced to adapt very quickly to an online teaching environment, it has been challenging. We have taken the lessons learned over these last few months. We've developed a team and also created a robust, flexible, and innovative option for the delivery of instruction for our students. The future of education will always have some level of online instruction. For parents that have enjoyed the online instructional experience starting in March, to parents and guardians that are not sure of what the level of exposure to COVID will be like during this upcoming summer, this upcoming school year, we want to offer parents and guardians and students options. Now, this experience will be more robust and has been extensively planned, as I have mentioned. So we are going to be using in the Virtual Scholars Academy, we're going to be using Virtual Virginia content. They use a platform, a learning management system called Canvas. It's very robust. This content will be supplemented with our own Norfolk curriculum, as well as our own pacing guides. So we could have a seamless move from online instruction to face-to-face instruction. The Virginia Department of Education's Virtual Virginia program offers many online courses, over 100. They have digital content. They have professional development opportunities as well for instructors, teachers, and students, and for educators across the Commonwealth. Virtual Virginia offers advanced placement classes, world language classes, many electives, all the core academic courses. They're offering courses from K-12 all the way up to students across the Commonwealth and really throughout the world as well. The courses utilize a course management software, which I had mentioned before, called Canvas, and that will maximize the interactivity of each class, where teachers can create videos before class starts, and they can be able to have multimedia throughout their class courses. Each course contains video segments, audio clips, whiteboard interaction, as well as, again, multimedia activities, online discussions, as well as text. Teachers will be available for telephone and online communication with students throughout the day. Virtual Virginia courses will offer a rich multimedia learning environment that really does appeal to a variety of our learning styles for our students. Virtual Virginia courses can be scheduled flexibly throughout the school day, as courses do not have to be taken in real time, which is called asynchronous. We anticipate many of the courses will be asynchronous, but we will also be using Zoom, as we've used this past year, to create a synchronous classroom as well. So instruction and communication with the teacher will be live. We will allow current NPS teachers to apply prior to August 1, and a process that will ensure our Virtual Scholar Academy teachers are also engaging. The Virtual Scholars Academy will be for K-12 NPS students that are interested in attending. There may be a variety of reasons for students and families to choose this instructional delivery model. We know there'll be many questions, so we're developing a complete website that will go live prior to August 1st. This website will have teacher, student, and parent/guardian guidelines. We need to make sure that teachers and the students have guidelines, as well as the learning coaches at home, which are the parents, especially for the younger students. Those guidelines will all be posted by August 1. We will also have student applications available to ensure that we have student contact information, and it could also match courses and the supports the students need to be successful starting in September. The website will also have sample schedules so that families can decide, is this an environment that their student can be successful in, as well as teachers understanding what a day will look like in this online environment. Currently, our private and homeschooled students may enroll in Virtual Virginia courses at a cost of $375 per course. Since Norfolk Public Schools will be using our current teachers to instruct these courses, private and homeschooled students, once becoming an NPS student, can take all of their courses for free. So we do see this potentially to increase overall enrollment in the school division. Right now, as we look at these different options, we have the following next steps. Number one, to continue the planning with input from community stakeholders to include, but not limited to, teachers and staff, representatives also from NFT and EAN, as well as students. We need their input. We will also address other factors as related to the governor's and the CDC guidelines, make the Virtual Scholars Academy website live with additional information for parents, guardians, and interested teachers, and also submit all documents regarding our health and instructional plan to the Virginia Department of Education before we open in September. Thank you, and this concludes our presentation for tonight.
At this time, we're happy to address any questions that you may have related to the options presented.
Ms. Campson?
Ms. Campson, you're on mute.
On mute.
I was trying to be so cool today, like I knew what I was doing here. Okay, Mr. Cataldo,
Yes.
when you talk about, so there's going to be a separate group of teachers that will be working in the Virtual Scholars Academy, is that correct?
Well, no, not exactly. Many of our current teachers could be picking up a class or so. And we also anticipate, depending on the number of students that want to go in. So for example, in the presentation, Dr. Pohl mentioned about 26% of our parents showed interest. So in our elementary schools where, certification is usually like K5 or K6, it would be easier if we were to use some of those teachers that would not be needed because you have 25% fewer students in the school. So we'll be using, and we're still working with the exact model we'll be following with that, but we're going to be using a similar model as used in other school divisions and other virtual platforms.
Well, since research shows that about a fourth of the teachers across the country, so I assume Norfolk is somewhere in there, have an underlying health condition, and also that we have some teachers that are past the age of 60, which also makes them high risk. Would those people be given priority to work on in the virtual program so that they would not be increased because they're at higher risk than everyone else?
Yes, we are going to be having an application process for our teachers. And of course, we want our teachers to be engaging. So if we have teachers that, again, fall into those same characteristics that you had mentioned, we would work with those teachers, with our ITRTs, with our professional development to ensure that they have engaging instruction in their classes. But yes, we definitely would want to look to our own teachers that do not feel comfortable coming back to the school year as potential teachers for our program.
And especially the ones that are high risk, because that's a big concern for me, is that they would be the high risk ones. Okay, and you know what I should have said at the beginning. First of all, welcome to our new people. We're so excited. I finally get to see well, two of you, of course, I already know what you look like, but it was good to see our new team, our new chief academic officer. Welcome to Norfolk Public Schools. That's so exciting. And I would like to just say, and I'm turning the floor to someone else, is how impressed I was with this presentation, Dr. Birdsong. You and your team have done a great job. You've given us a big variety, and the Virtual Academy offers us a fallback that's now we having time to prepare in case the governor shuts us down again with not a lot of notice like he did last time. So congratulations, guys. Nice to meet this new team and see how well you're working. Great plans. I love it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Yassine. Mr. Clanton?
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought all I heard was Mr. Singh. I'm sorry. Again, welcome to all of our new members of the team. So I just want to dive right in. Again, this is a great presentation, great options that are here. Ms. Campson actually led into one of the questions that I had was with the virtual planning that we're doing right now, and if we were to move with any of the other options, what would kind of be our fallback? What would we be prepared to pull kids out of school if we were in a situation where we were doing a half day or whatever, option 1 or 2, we could move to the virtual. And then I guess it goes back to this, will we still be looking at a distribution plan like we were doing with computers and MiFis and all that other stuff?
Yes.
Absolutely. Yes,
Okay.
we are preparing to do that. Certainly, we know who the children are that still have devices that we disseminated when we went into closure. So we know who those children are, and certainly we would be dependent upon building principals to make sure that they're in communication with their family, so that we would know, you know, if there are children that are still in need of MiFi devices as well as Chromebooks. So
Great.
yes, and at any moment, yes, we would be prepared to go strictly online. I'm sure a lot of you have been watching the news and, you know, different school divisions around us that are, you know, starting the fall with remote learning. So that's certainly something that we have to be prepared for anyway, you know, under the guidance of the Virginia Department of Education. That is a required component of our instructional plan, and that's to have a 100% remote plan, you know, on how to provide new instruction to students. So we will be prepared for that.
Great. The follow-up to that one was about option 3, of course, looked at fully opening the schools, and based on the information you presented today, carries the greatest risk, and which personally has been one of my greatest concerns every day, that this is evolving. And as we're seeing, it's no secret, the numbers are shifting up, and even today's report showed how they're increasing in the city of Norfolk. With going with option 1 or 2, I know that we're reducing the number of sizes there, but I guess in some respect, is there still a risk that is still associated health-wise with option 1 and 2? Because I don't think that I heard that in the presentation. I know that we talked about reduce, and I think it was emphasized more in 3, but I think for those who are watching, is there still a possibility, even with the reduced class sizes there, even with the cleaning, that there could still be some risk of exposure in even option 1 and 2?
Absolutely. And there is an absolute risk with these options. With option 1, basically with option 1, students would have 2 days in-person instruction, 3 days virtual instruction, group A or group B, and then daily face-to-face for our most vulnerable population. So certainly anytime we have children back in our buildings, staff back in our buildings, we're going to assume some risk, period, regardless of whatever model we implement outside of, you know, the 100% virtual learning. So yes, there will be risk.
Great. And I think Mr. Pohl was trying to...
Mr. Pohl, did you have something to add?
If I could follow up too, on July 6th, VDOE as well as the Virginia Health Department put out some more guidance. And Mr. Clanton, exactly right. They listed 3 things there with their guiding principles. Lowest risk is students and teachers engaged in virtual only. More risk is the small and in person, and then highest risk is full size. So there is risk involved, absolutely.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Pohl. Ms. Basine, go ahead.
Okay. First, I too thank you, Dr. Birdsong, and your whole team for the work that you're doing, and especially want to welcome those new in their roles. So welcome and thank you for the presentation today. As Dr. Birdsong knows, I've had lots of questions over the last couple of months, and while getting the presentation about where we might be going in the future once school opens, I would like to know what we're doing to assess the impacts of the mandated school closure from the spring to guide and inform our plans going forward. So I don't know if you can speak to that and what kind of information we might receive based on the VDOE's equity planning audit that they had suggested as a possible tool.
So yes, I think we are prepared perhaps today with being able to provide you any information that you need about the mandated school closure and what data we were able to collect, which informed our options that we have presented to you today. And in fact, I'm going to let Dr. Pohl and Dr. Cataldo speak to some of that data. They will talk about the percentage of children that we were able to engage, our plan moving forward, and actually the plan that we have currently implemented to address a lot of those, the needs of the children who weren't able to successfully engage during the closure, information or data from teachers and principals. I think it will provide you with kind of a framework for why we presented the options that we did today. So Dr. Cataldo, you want to start with some of those data points that we've discussed?
Yes, definitely. Thank you very much. Yes, so the best way that we were able to determine how our students were doing, since our teachers were not present in the buildings, is through surveys. And so what we did is we did 2 surveys. We did one in the beginning of May to all of our teachers, and we did one in the beginning of June as well to all of the teachers. What we found is in the beginning of May, we had about 61% students engaged in the division as reported by the teachers. So we had the highest engagement in K-8 schools and elementary schools, and then a little less engagement in middle and high school. When we submitted a second survey in June, we had actually increased our overall engagement to 72%. So by 11 percentage points, student engagement. We saw large increases in the K-8 schools, large increases in elementary, and then middle and high school. And one thing we attribute that to is that coincided with the time that we handed out computers and hotspots to all of our students and families in need. And anecdotally from the teachers, we've spoken with teachers and administrators, and they have told us that it made a huge difference. In some schools, it was very dramatic. Crossroads, Norview Elementary, Ingleside, where they were, 90+% student engagement because they had devices. So that was our plan to really determine where our levels of engagement were. Now, this was a continuity plan that we were following, and then if we look through. We also made changes to our Q4 guidelines. And those changes in Q4, what it did is allowed students to take an incomplete. If they were not engaged, they would receive an incomplete and be able to work on that incomplete all the way until August 28th. And so what we felt was that there may be some families that are just not able to deal with everything going on. There may be students that have moved and stayed with somebody else, possibly for the year if their parents weren't able, maybe their parents were first responders, that kind of thing. So we wanted to give an option for those students. And currently we actually have 95 teachers, 95 elementary teachers, and 122 secondary teachers that are working with all of those students that received incompletes. Now, again, we had 84% in the division not getting incomplete, so 84% engagement. And now we have a program where we are working all the way up until August 28th with those 95 elementary teachers, 122 secondary teachers, and we are churning those incompletes into regular Q4 grades for the students. So we have successfully contacted already 3,100 students and are working towards making that move. But we're only about 30% into the summer, and we already have over that percentage covered. So we feel very optimistic that our students that lost that instruction during that summer, during the closure and COVID, will be able to recoup that and be able to continue on with their school and be able to be in a good place for this upcoming September.
Okay.
In addition to that, we made some adjustments to our curriculum, and I'd like Dr. Pohl to address those adjustments.
So within the curriculum, we're really focusing on how do we look at items from March 13th on that were not covered, and how do we incorporate those in the start of the year, knowing that our students across the board, even those that were highly engaged, probably weren't as engaged as if we were having face-to-face traditional instruction. So all of our content coordinators and specialists are reviewing curriculum and redoing our pacing charts and including items from the spring of last year to make sure that we're recovering those, to make sure our students are on point with the learning they need. And then we're also investing in additional hourly wages for teachers to do additional tutoring and whatnot in the fall when we are able to open, or if we open online, to reach out to those students. The last thing that we want to do is see a student who was successful up to March 13th lose that success. So we're doing everything, even beyond August 28th. If a student still wasn't successful and there's reasoning for it, we're going to work with the students one by one to make sure that they reach their potential that they need to reach. And the entire academic affairs team is aware of that process too. And I think in addition, we do have a pretty robust summer school schedule for some virtual learning opportunities for our students to keep them engaged. So I'm looking forward to seeing how those really roll out for us this summer.
Okay, thank you. And do you, could I ask a follow-up? So about what percentage of the students that weren't engaged were our students with IEPs and our English language learners? And do you?
I will have to get that for you. I have the total engagement, but we are working with principals directly to get the numbers of where we are. But I will work on that for you, Ms. Basine. Absolutely.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Madam Chair, can I ask additional ones, or do you want to? We can move on.
I'd like to move on and then come back. Is that okay?
Yes.
Ms. Smith, go ahead.
Mute.
Ms. Smith, you're muted.
Thank you. Welcome, everyone. And thank you, Dr. Birdsong. I keep hearing the word engagement being used. Can you describe to us what engagement means, what you're measuring when you use the term engagement with us?
Absolutely, Ms. Smith. So, during the mandated closure, we offered, we disseminated Chromebooks and MiFis because we wanted our children to be able to access our learning in place plans online. So we did that. And in addition to that, we made paper packets available for those parents, for whatever reason, chose not to pick up a device, or some parents just preferred paper and pencil, that method for their children because that's how they learn best. When we didn't have any communication with the child for whatever reason, if teachers reached out via telephone call, if teachers reached out via email, trying to connect with the students through Zoom and other methods, and we just had no level of communication, we would say that is a disengaged student. So that's, in a nutshell, that's how we define that. Those children that were responding to the Learning in Place plan, were participating in the Zoom meetings, returning their work to their teachers, we consider that child to be engaged. Of course, there were different levels of engagement, but in a nutshell, if we didn't have any communication with the family, we would say that was disengagement.
Thank you. And I have one more question. So education is definitely an important part of the reopening of schools, but also the health and safety of everyone who enters the building is also an important factor. So what measures will we have to ensure or to maximize as much as we can the protection of anyone who enters the building? What type of PPE will we have in place? There was something else I was thinking about with that, with PPE. If someone gets sick, if someone tests positive, what is our plan for that? Will we test daily? What are we going to do? Another thing, Dr. Birdsong, in this area that concerns me is when you walk into our average school and most main offices in a school, it's just wide open. There's no protection for our faculty and staff who work in main offices for people who enter into there. There's no barriers or anything like that. And in the school also, you know what I'm saying? The transitioning of classes, especially at the high school and middle school level, and trying to keep distancing. I don't understand how we're going to make all that work.
Ms. Smith, it's a very complex challenge that we have ahead of us, and I'm not going to make light of it at all. Everything you have just said is, we are extremely concerned about, but certainly we're going to be prepared to receive children if the board decides to, implement an option that involves children coming back into the buildings. Because as I said, certainly in-person instruction would be the most effective and meaningful way to engage our children, but we have to be able to do so very safely. And definitely we need to consider the health conditions or our health data. And I think early on in the presentation, Dr. Pohl pointed out, the data around, Hampton Roads and the city of Norfolk. And, right now we have a 16.7 positive testing rate, which is extremely concerning to us. And that definitely means that we have a substantial community spread. So I definitely know that we need to make a decision about which option to implement based on our health data, because at the end of the day, the safety of our children and staff have to be first, period. It has to be first. We don't want to put a child in harm's way, nor a teacher or a staff member. So we have made plans in terms of purchasing PPE, making sure that our buildings are clean, and making sure we have the appropriate equipment and things of that nature so that we are prepared. I see Dr. Gibson is smiling because she's been working very hard with her staff in this area. So I'd like to give her an opportunity to speak to your questions as well, Ms. Smith. Dr. Gibson.
Thank you, Dr. Birdsong. Ms. Smith, your questions were asked today in one of our one of our cluster meetings with our elementary principals, and we are currently ordering plexiglass. We're trying to make sure that it's going to get here in time to be placed in schools, in the offices, so that there are barriers in place. Teachers want to know how we're going to space halls, how we're going to space classrooms. There is a health plan for returning to school. There's a health plan for working with students up throughout the building. We are going to follow the guidelines that are stipulated in the health plan, and that's easy to say, but actually bringing in all of the equipment and materials and supplies. The Student Support Services Department that is dealing with student wellness is ordering equipment, masks, tape, thermometers, plexiglass, gloves, almost everything they could think of to put the protection there. But the social distancing and the actual carrying out and coordinating, getting all of these things delivered to buildings, things are going to look very different as we proceed over the coming weeks. Once the equipment arrives, it has to be dispersed out to the schools. So we're going to be working to try to ensure that we're following the CDC guidelines and we're ready to receive the children if they're going to come into the building. If something happens, if someone gets sick, we're going to make sure that we have protocols in place that can be followed so that everyone can be notified. Protocols for helping families get the services and support they need are there. The health department is assisting and supporting the schools. So this is a whole new world we're navigating, and we're kind of in the middle of the ocean, making it work and trying to put it together all at the same time. I hope this kind of gives you some sense of an answer.
Thank you, Dr. Gibson. I'd like to go ahead and give Dr. Gabriel a chance to ask her question and then follow up with Ms. Basine, please.
Okay. Thank you, Chairman Martin. I appreciate it. And again, welcome to all of the new staff members that are joining the NPS family. That was a very thorough presentation, and I completely understand the complexity that our school division is dealing with. It's complex in my world as well. I would like to first acknowledge all of the emails that several of us have received from parents and stakeholders. I think that there's a tremendous amount of concern about, both from the family side and from the teacher side, what the unknown might hold for the school. And so I do appreciate all of those emails. And I appreciate Dr. Birdsong and staff, your acknowledgement of the child care issues, the work issues, because a lot of parents are really trying to grapple with what they can do best for their families. And I appreciate you acknowledging that as you discuss the different options. So I'll ask the 3 questions that I have, and then I'll just, however the answers end up falling, then we can do it that way. My first question is, and the options that you presented, I know that you have option 1 and option 2. So what are the thoughts behind how you might choose between options 1 and 2? That's the first one. The second one, are there any policies that the board is going to have to adjust, or laws such as attendance policies? So if you have multiple episodes of a child being out more than 10 days, is that going to have to be amended? Or will a resolution that we have already adopted kind of cover absenteeism? And then finally, can you speak to exactly what the CARES Act money covers? Because I've heard that, oh, the school division has CARES money and they're going to be able to pay for so many things. But can you just please share with all exactly what the CARES money covers and what are the limitations? Thank you.
So this is going to be a team approach. So team, feel free to chime in as needed. So your first question, Dr. Gabriel, I'm sorry, was around, you had 3 questions. The first question again was around, could you kind of just recap it very quickly?
Sure. And choosing between option 1 and 2.
The options. Well, yeah. At the end of the day, the guidance that we've received from the governor as well as the Virginia Department of Education is that we work in collaboration with our school board. So it's not, an administrative decision. Certainly, we're here because we have to implement what the school board will be recommending. And so that we're trying to do the very best that we can to provide you with some viable options to look at. But again, at the end of the day, the decision that needs to be made should be in the best interest of our students and our staff, period. We have to continue to monitor our local health data. That should inform our decision making. Is it, do we have a substantial community spread? Are we comfortable bringing our kids back in the building and our teachers with that? I mean, those are the types of things that we have to consider. So that's first and foremost. And as it relates to the CARES Act, it is not in an unlimited pool of funding, okay? So there are certainly things that and I think Ms. Basine spoke to this yesterday, that we don't know. There are things that we just don't know at this point. There are things that may require some financial support that we're just not even aware of today. But I can assure you that we are utilizing those funds to cover the cost of PPE, for example, which is, it's a lot. We're using monies to support the payment of teachers to work with our children who were disengaged during the closure. We're hiring teachers to do that. We'll need to utilize that funding next year when, because there will be, if we're not in school face-to-face 5 days, there will be gaps in learning. There are going to be gaps in learning anyway. It's just the nature of our work. And so that's the majority of our funding will be to support those areas, and it's not an unlimited pot of funding.
So if you don't mind, Dr. Birdsong.
Not at all, please.
The attendance piece, Dr. Gabriel, we're also waiting for guidance from the VDOE on that to see what they're willing to be flexible on or not before we would go forward with any kind of a board policy change locally. And in addition, with the CARES Act, we're also using some of that funds to meet some of our IDEA requirements and to do some of the summer work to re-catch our students back up. of course, some Chromebooks and technology and hotspots to make sure that all of our students have the information, lots of PPE and cleaning supplies as well. And then the remediation services for our students, as well as a couple to make sure all of our schools have a few online programs in case we do have to go fully online, so that we know there's interactive learning that can go on as well. We do have it pretty well proportioned out, but like Dr. Birdsong says, it's a 2-year plan of spending. So we need to be careful, because if we get to next year and it's gone and we're in this situation still, we have to be careful on how we spend that.
Okay. All right, let's move on to Ms. Basine and Mr. Jordan, and then Mr. Clanton.
Okay, thank you. So one of the reasons I started off with the impacts of the mandated closure was largely, as we went to all virtual, obviously. But where I stand today with the limited capacity of this country, the state, and our locality to appropriately handle this public health crisis, which seems to be worsening every day, I'm at a point right now where, I would like to encourage and recommend that we do consider fully going virtual come the fall. And I say this because I feel like there's a lot of information that the school board doesn't have yet, and not because the administration is not working toward it. I think you guys are, rapidly working toward getting things in place to safely receive children in school. But as it sounds like there are some unknowns about whether we would have some of the material in place come the first day of school, such as the plexiglass. It seems that there's some uncertainty around that, not only for Norfolk, but for divisions, across the Commonwealth and the country. So it's no fault of anyone's. It's just, it seems to be, the state of affairs right now. So what is to stop us from going fully virtual, really developing, and it sounds like you already have done tremendous work around improving the virtual experience from what was had in the spring. And really, we could come up with a really great product for all of our students. We had almost no choice. I mean, we had to jump into emergency planning and execution right away in the spring. And I have no doubt that we can come up with something really wonderful, much more engaging and beneficial for our students while keeping everyone safe. And so that, to me, is my biggest concern right now, is the safety of our children, staff, teachers, everyone, because we will not be able to comprehend the impact once, God forbid, a child were to die or a teacher were to die from this virus. So right now, like where I stand today, I would like to know more about the Virtual Scholars Academy, and is that different from going completely virtual for all students? Because it sounds like there's an application process for those that would apply to Virtual Virginia. I'd like to know a little bit more about that. What we can do, what processes will be in place based on the impacts from the spring to ensure that, every student population, especially those that require greater instructional supports, will get what they need. Could we even consider, and I'm throwing some suggestions out there, but could our seniors who are near graduation, could we do an early graduation, provide that option to them, which I think some seniors may have already taken that opportunity because they were already close to meeting the graduation requirements. Could we, how do we take this opportunity to really have the best product available for all students versus trying to piecemeal, because we're just in the situation that we're in, these various options, which in a blink of an eye, could change, the next week. I mean, we could be closing down, September 15th, and here we are. So that's just something I'm just laid it on the table. Like, what is to stop us right now from saying, let's just do this, and let's do the best that best that we can while taking the lowest risk possible.
And so, Ms. Basine, you need to know that the board can make that decision today, and we will work toward that.
Mhm.
Okay.
And so Dr. Cataldo can speak more to the Virtual Academies program or the Virtual Scholars program. This is something that we thought about early on during the closure. We thought, if this continues to happen throughout the summer and conditions don't change, or if we have a spike, we need to be prepared to go back online 100% for all children. So let's start planning now. And so out of that came our Virtual Scholars program. So we did some research with the Canvas piece in Virtual Virginia. We had Mr. Cloud look over the MOU for us to make sure it was legally sound. We proceeded with that, and we're just at the stage now of just putting it together. The reason we presented it as an option is because we wanted to provide that option for parents, even if we decided to go with option 1 or option 2. We wanted parents to know that in addition to, in-person instruction, if you're not at all comfortable with that, we have another option for you, and that's 100% virtual. And this is what that looks like. So we are prepared to do in person, again, depending upon what our health data looks like and what direction the board wants to go in. Or we are prepared to do 100%, online Virtual Virginia, utilizing our learning management system, which would be the Canvas program. So we are certainly prepared to move forward with that. So Dr. Cataldo, if you want to speak a little more to that, and Dr. Pohl about how we're going to be looking at pacing and making sure that, as much as possible, certainly it wouldn't be like in-person instruction, and we wouldn't want the pacing to be the same as if a teacher were in front of a child, but let's address that, just fill in the details. Dr. Cataldo, you want to start with the whole Canvas piece and our, the new learning management system in Virtual Virginia and the courses and the children who could access it, which would be K-12.
Yes, definitely. Thank you very much. Yes, that would be for K-12 students, and really Virtual Virginia has been around a long time. And many of our secondary schools, especially the high schools, know very well about Virtual Virginia because many students take courses through that program. So we're going to be ready for 100% online, either in the Virtual Scholars Academy if parents would choose to do that, or if the whole division is in that situation. So we're definitely going to be ready for that. We have been in constant communication with Virtual Virginia. We were actually one of the earliest ones that got some of the information in, provided our input as well. And also, again, working with Mr. Brady and his team to ensure that the curriculum matches Virtual Virginia and the pacing for our face-to-face students. So if we were in a situation where, let's say we are going face-to-face, teachers can teach right from that curriculum, right from Virtual Virginia on their own laptop to students face-to-face. And if we have to go online completely, then they can do that same type of instruction, same materials, same pacing, whether you're virtual or you're face-to-face. So we're definitely ready for that and to move in that direction if that is what the board decides to do.
Okay.
If I could, sorry, go ahead, Ms. Basine. Sorry about that.
I was just going to ask a clarifying question. So if we were to go fully online, fully virtual come the fall, they would be doing it through Virtual Virginia only. Is that?
Well, Virtual Virginia is K-12 and it's over 100 courses, and
right.
any courses, they'll be using that platform, but they'll also have Zoom, and some of our teachers that like Google Classroom can integrate Google Classroom directly into Canvas.
Gotcha.
So we're not going to lose any of those other options that we've been doing for this past spring that many of our teachers feel comfortable with. The only new part will be that Virtual Virginia Canvas, and we are preparing right now our professional development for all of our teachers, and also we are preparing even training for our parents too. So then parents will know how to utilize and use that system as well as students. So we're going through a full planning now.
Yeah. And are you also considering expanding our dual enrollment options for our students at the high school level so that they may, get the benefit of having the college coursework and the high school credit?
So
Nice.
I can answer that, Dr. Cataldo. So I talked to Ms. Goshen yesterday about our dual enrollment program and asked for her to start investigating even second semester courses. So if we had a student who wanted to be an early grad, instead of pushing them to be an early grad, push them into first semester completion of some courses, but then dual enrollment second semester so that we can give them that college opportunity before graduating. That is something, however, we would have to come back to the board for approval of different courses if we don't have them on the books already. But we are definitely looking at seeing what TCC is offering online so that we can offer that to our students and really push any student into that direction so that they get that experience, even if they're not college bound, if they maybe for a strong certification, something to give them a more robust experience online where possible. And I did want to add to Dr. Cataldo's statement. I think what I want to make sure the public is aware of, Virtual Virginia is a fully asynchronous program. However, the way Dr. Cataldo, his team, and Mr. Brady and his team are developing it is so it's blended. So if we are 100% online in the fall, we'll actually have a schedule of Zoom meetings for students to attend so that we have that face-to-face support on a regular basis as well, which would be different if we have to do a blended model, because then the teacher would be teaching when students are doing asynchronous learning. So I know some of the divisions that have already come out and said we're going to do 100% virtual. Ms. Bassina, exactly why you said, because they know they can do it stronger that way and have a better impact on the student learning. So those are conversations we're already having on how do we develop that robust program. Absolutely.
Great.
Iowa Community College also uses Canvas.
Yeah.
So that's their platform, Canvas.
Right. Okay.
We're going to
Thank
move
you.
on
I'll yield. Yeah, move on.
to Mr. Jordan, then Mr. Clanton, and Ms. Smith. Okay.
So I echo all the welcomes and congratulations that others have said. I have lots of questions. I know there's no way I'm going to be able to get through them all, but I also want to just thank Ms. Martin for allowing for the discussion. And also I think, as we talked about yesterday, that we're going to have, at least I think we're going to have further discussion between now and whenever it is that we decide to take a vote. Let me go back to the survey data first. Is there any demographic data or additional analysis to give a sense of who completed the survey, both in terms of demographics of families and geocoding or geographic location of or even by school who completed the survey?
We definitely have the data by school. Dr. Cataldo did work with the principals to gather the data by school.
Yeah, so I think it would be helpful because I don't know what, or maybe you can just give us a sense of what that looks like, that we find that. I'm really just trying to see in terms of the responses that you got, did you see that responses were widely distributed across the division, or did you see that there were specific clusters in terms of responses?
So when you, just a clarifying question. So when you're talking about the survey, you mean the survey that we sent to parents asking what options they wanted, or the survey that we?
The teacher survey.
No, I meant both. No, I did need the parent survey as well as the teacher survey.
For the teacher survey, that went out to every single school, and we had the teachers put down their first and last name as completing the survey, and we followed up with principals to ensure that all of their teachers completed the survey. So we were able to get information from every single teacher at every single one of our schools, and we had that follow-up. We did that both for the survey, the first survey, and the second survey. So we feel the data we collected was 100%. And we do have it broken down by school as well. But every single one of our teachers and schools did report that data for the teacher survey.
And then your engagement data would be available by school.
Yes.
We have the response percentage by school that can be shared with you guys, Mr. Jordan. Absolutely. I'm looking at it right now, actually.
Okay. And then on the parent data, any sense of any additional breakdown of the respondents to the parent survey?
The parent survey that went out as a division survey.
Yeah, the survey where you're identifying, for example, 3,615 elementary school responses. Is there anything that identifies demographically who responded to that survey?
That one is what I'm referring to, that I do have the school percentages for. I don't see where there's anything that says demographically, but I do have the school percentages, so we could look at school zones, but nothing further than that was asked on that specific survey, Mr. Jordan.
Yeah, because I would just, part of the core issue that we've been dealing with pre-pandemic and has been amplified during the pandemic are these access gaps. So it would be very interesting, at least to me, to have a sense of when we are making decisions based upon feedback, who is it that we are receiving feedback from and who is it that we are not? Similarly, as you all were identifying who was engaged and who was not. The other piece of that is on the devices themselves. So during the shutdown and at this point, are we saying that Norfolk Public Schools has provided a device and a hotspot for every single child enrolled in our division at this point?
What we can say, Mr. Jordan, is that it was offered to every family that chose to take one. Now, 100% of the parents who did not have one took us up on that offer. So that's why I said that, it would be important for the principals to be able to do another survey of their students at the beginning of the year to determine who would need a device. But it was offered to all families, as you know, but not all families took us up on the offer.
And then when it was described that, I think I heard that some families still have devices. So do those devices come back for maintenance and then are reissued, or is the plan they just keep them come September?
Well, again, we had no idea of what the opening would look like. So we didn't have all families to bring those devices back in, Mr. Jordan, because we thought there could be a possibility that we would be back online. So why collect the devices over the summer to have to redisseminate them, during the fall? So the only children or families that came back in and turned over the devices were those that were transitioning out, like transitioning from elementary school to middle school, from middle school into high school, and the high school graduates.
Yeah, just a thought that so I agree with Ms. Bassine. I think we need to be prepared as a division for a 100% virtual, no matter what. That we should be prepared for that.
Yeah.
Just because health conditions may require it.
Right.
But if we have devices that have been out, then trying to make sure that they have gone through some servicing so that whenever the new instruction takes place, that we know that everything is working, everybody has access. I think something you all may want to consider. On the everyday in-person half-day option, where we're saying that students would go half in the morning and then another group would go half in the afternoon, what's the plan for the cleaning in between?
And that's one of the difficulties or challenges that Dr. Gibson pointed out, that if we had to go in that direction, it would have to be a quick cleaning, but that certainly, if we implemented that type of option, that would be a challenge around that option.
Okay, and like I said, I have lots of questions, but I'm going to yield. But I do think it'd be helpful if we could really get a better sense of how things went during the shutdown. Yesterday, during our retreat, I was answering a question and I was discussing the difference between outputs and outcomes. So an example for me is stating that students were engaged. To me is an output. It tells us that 72% or 61% of the students may have been engaged. I don't have a real good sense of the outcome. How did students perform when they were engaged? How did they do with the package? packets, where are our students academically from, where we are today versus where they would be moving forward. But I do think that we're going to need more discussion. I do think we should be prepared for 100% virtual as our fallback. And as part of that, whatever professional development has to take place, you all mentioned several platforms. So, just trying to learn one is a challenge. Trying to make sure that everybody from the teacher to the student is comfortable with all those platforms presents many things for us to consider. Oh, and I know one last question. Is there anything that we have already submitted to the health department as far as our health plan?
Yes.
So is that something that can be shared with the board, what was submitted?
Well, it hasn't even come back to us yet, but Dr. Gibson, do you want to share with Mr. Jordan and the board the components of the plan that we've submitted to the VDH?
We submitted an overall school health plan for the division, and we've also submitted an athletics component. We are currently waiting for the health department to give us an email that approves that plan. Once we get that email, then we will be able from there to submit it to the superintendent's office, and then she will then submit it to the state. Then we'll wait 24 hours and we will be ready to begin the conditioning that the other school divisions are doing, but we have to wait for the green light from the health department before we can move forward.
Right, I understand. I'm just trying to give the board a sense of what our health plan is.
We've been waiting for about 2 weeks, and I know the health department is overwhelmed, and each day we've been checking. We're hoping tomorrow to get an answer. If we don't get an answer, we're calling each day just to see, are you ready yet? Like, we're excited, kids anticipating to be able to get our kids on the field. And we're hoping that if not by tomorrow, by Monday, we'll get that email from the health department.
Thank you.
Ms. Martin, I'll be very quick with my question follow up here. As we're talking about health, and I know that the student health, but teacher health, one of the things that my question here is if we do have any teachers that are exposed or require quarantining, do we have anything in place that will, I know that teachers build up a sick bank, but what do we have in place that will allow them to be able to quarantine for 14 days, which is recommended, and for them still to receive some type of compensation? Do we have something that's already worked out in that? Is that something that's come from the board as far as a policy, or is that something that was covered under the CARES Act?
Yeah, at this time, during the closure, we really haven't had to deal with that much. But Mr. Billups is currently in the process of putting a protocol together. In fact, we have a meeting tomorrow with the new chiefs to talk about that protocol and what it will look like from when school starts. But at the end of the day, something will be in place, and certainly teachers will have to quarantine. We're getting lots of questions from the media about specific schools and individuals. And as you know, we do not want to violate HIPAA. So we're very careful about providing that information.
Got it. And so we're also prepared for, I guess, if we start losing teachers and they go down and we move with an option 1 or 2 or 3, the bank that we have typically with substitutes, stress, those things being placed into consideration, that those could have some adverse effects to either one of these other plans that we go with.
Absolutely. And quite honestly, Mr. Clinton, if we have in-person instruction, we just have to be prepared for that we're going to have a positive case, for a principal, a teacher, the superintendent, the chief academic officer. We just have to be prepared for that.
To spiral and kind of,
because it's inevitable.
Okay. Appreciate
Bringing
it.
people together, it's going to happen.
Ms. Smith and then Ms. Campson.
Yes. Dr. Birdsong, can you elaborate a little bit more on the virtual training that would or could be offered to parents and students to assist them with the usage of the Chromebooks and the Zoom meetings and all of that stuff?
Absolutely. And I'm going to let Dr. Pohl and Dr. Cataldo speak more to that, because it's their staff that's currently working on those options and providing that information to our parents. So Mike, I don't know if you or James want to speak to that, if you want to tell them a little more about the modules.
Yeah, I can jump in. Yeah, so we are currently creating modules and short videos for parents as well as students to be able to navigate through the platform. Additionally, not just for parents or students, but even for our teachers. We're developing a strong PD program for our teachers that when they come back in August, we'll be able to provide them with additional information. Also, we do have something it's in August. It's EdTech. We've had it the last 3 or 4 years. It's when we offer technology to teachers during the time that they're off. We have our ITRTs that provide that training, and we are actually going to be having multiple Canvas training opportunities during that time. So teachers will be able to get a jump on that training before they come back to school. When they come back to school, they will be getting additional training as well as modules for teachers, parents, and students. So we want to make sure the Canvas platform is easy to navigate. And it is. I've actually done a lot of work on the Canvas platform as far as the training piece. So I think it's going to be something that our parents and our students are really going to enjoy working with.
So how will we roll out this training though to the families? Because there are students as well as parents who are not as tech savvy as others and may need a little more hands-on or more attention than others.
Right.
So, and the good news is, Ms. Smith, is certainly before we roll out any initiative to parents, we would do everything that we could on our end to promote it, through, a Blackboard Connect email, a Blackboard Connect telephone call to our homes, included in our coronavirus newsletter. And fortunately, we have an ITRT assigned to every school, so that if a parent in a particular school needed some additional support, they would have support at the building level.
Okay.
So they could essentially contact their child's principal and say, I'm still struggling with this. I need some additional support. And we could have that ITRT work with that parent.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Ms. Campson, please take yourself off of mute. You're still on mute. Yeah.
I got it. Thank you for the reminder. I have a concern about our highest, our students who have that virtual learning is the least effective for, and we know that that's our English language learners, our special needs students, and our kindergarten through 3rd grade students who are in developmental reading. As a reading specialist, I'm well aware of the challenges it is to try and teach reading to a child online. So if we move into shutdowns and more limited things, what can we do? What are we doing about the special needs kids that have IEPs, the English language learners who are not speaking English and for the programs, and maybe they're in Spanish also? And what are we doing for what will we be doing for the kindergarten to 3rd grade students who are learning to read, and learning to read online is not usually very successful?
So I'm going to let Dr. Pohl address that, but I'm glad you mentioned our most vulnerable population of students. I don't know if you recall, but throughout the PowerPoint presentation, we did make notations for how we were going to ensure more in-person instruction for those children if in fact we went to one of the models that provided for face-to-face instruction. But we certainly have a backup plan for that if we're going to 100% virtual. Dr.
I'm
Pohl,
happy to hear that because
talking about.
I was very happy to see the half-day option at elementary because of the everyday, because of these children that need to learn how to read. Dr. Pohl?
So, Ms. Campson, one of the thoughts that we have even if the governor moves us back to phase 2 as a state, in phase 2, we're allowed to have our most vulnerable learners be face-to-face. So even if we go 100% virtual, we can develop a plan that would allow our pre-K 3 students, our SPED students, and our EL students to come in for some face-to-face. I'm not saying 100% every single day, but you're absolutely right. Teaching a student, a child to read is not a task you can do online very easily at all. So we would want to develop a plan that has some face-to-face interaction available for those students in very small groups. However, if we were fully virtual, that would be an easier thing for us to accomplish because transportation wouldn't pose the same issue as if we're trying to get 100% of our students to school at some point. But absolutely, we are trying to develop the best plans to make sure that our most vulnerable students have more face-to-face instruction because we already know they're falling behind further. There are several studies out right now that show, we usually have a summer slide. Now we have a COVID slide, and the gaps are just wider and wider than what anybody has ever experienced. So absolutely developing plans like that, Ms. Campson.
Right, that's what I've been looking at too, because the early research that's coming out is really focusing on the concerns with these children, and especially our K-3 children who there's a golden moment to learn how to read. And as they get older, if they don't know how to read, it's very difficult, as we all know, to go back and get that done. And then one quick last question. To know which students are having the biggest problem, what type of assessment will you be doing to see which ones are working grade level proficiency in reading and math in the elementary level and maybe even middle school, since reading and math proficiency levels are so important? Or do you have something that you'll be using for that as they start school? So the teachers, whether it's virtual or face-to-face, know where their children are and if they have particular weak areas, what those areas are.
Absolutely. So the video, we just put out a memo on VKRP, which is Virginia Kindergarten Readiness Performance, and then the PALS assessment as well. The VKRP does some reading and some math, as well as some social aspects. And then PALS, as we know, is fully on the reading side and comprehension. So those, we are still developing plans on how we can give the students the assessment at that level so we know where they are. Also, our curriculum teams are developing some more pre-assessments and formative assessments to really see where our students are. And I think this goes back to one of Mr. Jordan's comments earlier. We don't have that data set right now, and we're equally as worried about knowing where our students are. So as we come back to have some assessments, not saying that we want to pound the students with tests day one, we want to have the social emotional support in place, but we want to get the data to know where they are. So we're working on those tools as well, even using programs like we have. I don't want to mention specific program names on air, but different programs we have in place in the curriculum already, how we can use those tools for some assessments to find where our students are and what they need to do so we can get them back on track and in the learning mode again.
Well, I know that we do have an assessment that we use in grades 2 through 8, and if we're not mentioning names, that does give us not only whether they're grade level proficient in reading math, but also identifies the particular weak areas that children have so that can be zeroed in. I assume you're looking at stuff like that.
Correct. Absolutely.
All right. If we don't know where they are, it's hard to take them where they need to go. Absolutely. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
I do have a question going back to talking about the levels of COVID cases in our area, and the 16 point something was mentioned. 0.7. Okay, thank you, Dr. Norfolk. Okay, so my question is there have we identified a percentage? So say we start completely virtual, and then what is that? What are we looking for to determine whether or not we open? Is it the percentage? And if it is, or whatever that indicator would be to begin opening schools physically with face-to-face instruction, has there been any conversation about possibly using that indicator for other illnesses such as the flu and just other maladies that we're normally dealing with?
So let me make sure I understand your question. You want to know if there's a specific data point that we would look at and say, based on this, we're here and therefore we can't open schools? Is that what you're saying? Is there a specific data point we're looking at?
Say we start virtually.
Yeah.
And then how do we identify now is the time, like that there's a threshold of COVID in Norfolk? I'm just throwing that as an example. What is the indicator that we would then go into transition to face-to-face instruction?
I am certainly not a medical doctor, or I don't have a background in health, public health. We would certainly work with Dr. Lindsay and her team around what the local data looks like. What would their recommendations be around us opening schools? Certainly, we would be working with our school board to make those type of decisions. I don't think there's just one thing, but certainly the rate of transmission in our local area would certainly be something that we would want to look at. Like right now, I think statewide, there's been about a 10.1% transmission statewide. And again, in Norfolk, we're at 16.7 right now, which is, one of the reasons I'm assuming that the governor is trying to put some things in place right now for Hampton Roads in terms of reviewing some of, beach access plans and things of that nature. So I don't know if there's a specific data point, but we would certainly be in collaboration with our Virginia Department of Health to say, this is where we are right now. This is what we're facing. This is what's happened in schools over the last couple of weeks or week, or this is what's going on in our community right now. It's, again, very, very complex. I don't think there's one data point that we would look at, but this would need to be a collaborative decision alongside of the experts.
Okay, and to follow up to that, we've talked a lot about the school system as a whole. Will you be monitoring the readiness to transition into face-to-face instruction by school, with the possibility of maybe these 3 schools are ready to move into like our own phasing process?
Yes, and this is the work that Dr. Gibson has already, engaged in. And at the end of the day, if our board and, our governance team decides to move forward with an option that requires face-to-face, I wholeheartedly believe that our principals will be ready to go.
Thank you. Ms. Basine, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. So talking about with these options on the table still, for me, and I'll reiterate that I recommend that virtual is not our fallback, but our first option. Because first, if you can, I think the board needs to have, more information in terms of what the total cost is of these different options too. And can we even afford the options to, that have been offered to us? And number 2, like for instance, like, do we have a full-time nurse in every single school? Do we have, what about the air quality in our schools? What about working sinks in our schools? Where are we today, July 15th, in terms of ensuring that all of those things are in place? And, thinking about, we have to submit a plan 15 days before the opening of school. Is that correct? Did I hear that correct?
That is correct. Our instructional plan has to go in 15 business days prior to the first day.
Right. And so I guess I'm having some trepidation about, what our next steps is, because it is July 15th. And then, what do you need from us to support you to make that decision? So, when do key decisions need to be made? What's our timeline so that we can help you plan accordingly?
Ms. Basine, the board can make a decision today in terms of the option that they want the administration to work towards in terms of our opening. And certainly, if decisions were made today, that would give us time to do what we needed to do to make sure things were in place for our first day.
Okay. And if we were to do that, or if we were to, because I think there's some more information that some of us want, like, would you, because, so, let me back up a little bit. So if we were to choose the virtual, I think it gives us time to then do another survey that would address some of the questions I know Mr. Jordan asked, and then some other questions that I think that we could ask our parents in terms of, you know, is there a parent at home to help manage your child's online learning? Like, do we, like right now, I'm not sure that we currently have that information. And then what did they think was working well for them during the virtual experience of the spring, and what wasn't, so that we can ensure that we are meeting their needs. And to Mr. Jordan's point about knowing, you know, what are the needs of our families with students with IEPs? What sort of services do our students with who are English language learners, what do they need? What do, you know, how do we, I think making a decision sooner than later will help you with that. And then we can appropriately survey our parents or teachers so that we can have the best supports in place possible. So,
And I don't disagree with that at all.
Yeah.
Mr. Jordan.
Yes, just two of the many other things that I have. One, I'd like to know if there's been any conversation, I guess it's Region 2, with the regional superintendents about collaboration. I know a large number of our staff live outside of the city of Norfolk.
Right.
So, and we already know during the pandemic that many of our teachers and staff are dealing with their own circumstances around daycare and working with students and so forth. So I didn't know if there's been any discussion around trying to do some coordination regionally. And then my other question is, can you speak to what type of, how we looked at the risk mitigation of this whole thing? I know in the guidance, there was recommendation around having conversations with our attorneys and healthcare providers and others in regards to the whole liability issue. You don't need to necessarily go into detail with that right now, but I do think that's something as a board we also need to be aware of as we consider these decisions. What's the liability and health risk, and how do we mitigate that risk, both for the division, but also, as has been mentioned earlier, safety for our staff and our students.
So it's interesting you mentioned the risk factor. Mr. Billups and I participated in a conference call with some folks just around that area. And so one of the comments that was, you know, made during that that PD session was that not if, but when you get sued around a child having a positive case or a teacher having a positive case, you know, you just need to be prepared for that. And so making sure that certain things were in place. So as I said before, you know, in coming together, you know, I don't want us to be naive. When you bring people together, somebody's going to test positive, and that's going to have a domino effect. And I'm just, you know, so we just need to make sure that, you know, if we are in person, that we are ready to go. You know, there are different levels of risk that we're going to assume based upon the model that we implement. So that addresses that area. You also asked something else, Mr. Jordan, and I'm so sorry. There was something about risk, and then
about regional cooperation because of the staffing. Yeah.
So yes, Region 2 superintendents meet on a regular basis, and we were hoping to be able to roll out something together. But I do know, you know, just from hearing what our board is saying versus what other boards are talking about, I don't know how realistic that is in terms of us all making the same decision, because while this board may want to go in one direction, another board may want to go in another direction. But we had hoped to be able to coordinate, you know, making announcements at the same time. But I'm hearing that some divisions, maybe closer towards the end of this month, would be announcing that decision. So yes, a lot of our teachers that work here live in different places. A lot of teachers that work in Chesapeake, Virginia Beach, Portsmouth, you know, live there and work for us. And so we would want that level of coordination. but at the end of the day, it's up to, the board and that locality.
Yes, ma'am. Yeah, and I agree. My main thing is just you all have a better sense than probably we do in terms of the percentage of our workforce that lives in different divisions. So if other school divisions are making decisions, then it might, even before us, it might give us at least some sense of what impact they may have on our employee availability based upon these decisions that other divisions are making, if we have staff who live in these other divisions and have children in those other divisions. So just a thought point. So thank you.
Similar to that, though, is that the fact that we have parents who live in our division who, if we go with the virtual option, how do they manage that? So it's not just the teacher, our employees and their children from other divisions, but also our families here, and the thought that they might, if we choose to go virtual and they have to work, that they might then want to put their kids in another district, or look to other options. And so I think it's going to be a major impact for every community. Mr. Jordan, did you have a second question, or were you?
No, I'm good for now. Thank you.
Is everyone feel good about this? We have several other things on our agenda I'd like to move on with. Ms. Basine, did you have something? You're on mute.
You're on mute, Mrs. Basine.
Sorry. So what is our next step? So if we're not making a decision today, like what outcome were you hoping for in this discussion today? And what is the next step so that we can plan accordingly?
You're asking from my perspective or the board?
I would think yours.
Okay. Well, as I said before, certainly when the board is ready to give us, make a recommendation or make a decision around the option, then the administration could move forward.
Okay. And Madam Chair,
at the time to build structures and supports and systems around the option.
Right.
Okay.
So Madam Chair, I was going to say, we have our next scheduled meeting is August 12th, which sounds very late, too late to be making this decision is my guess, my educated guess here. So what, or is this something you may want to discuss this, but I would recommend that we, like I mentioned during the retreat, I think we need to have more discussion and more time around this sooner than later so that Dr. Birdsong and her team can work to put a plan together.
Okay. It has,
and you also need to understand that while you may decide to give us a recommendation or an option that you would want us to move forward with, that even if we open schools with that option, that depending upon, again, the conditions at that time, it could be that we implement another plan. Like we're looking at our data, the percent of positive cases are significantly decreasing. Therefore, we can be prepared to implement maybe the option 2 or 3 or what have you. I mean, I think we need to be a little flexible, knowing that even though we start with one, doesn't mean we have to continue it for the full year or even a semester. That we would need to be flexible and again, depending on the conditions of our community, the health.
We need to keep monitoring this vigilantly. Ms. Kiamson, and then I'm going to go around and ask a question. Go ahead, and you're on mute.
Why are we meeting on the 12th of August instead of the 5th? If we were meeting on our regular first Wednesday, I must have missed something there.
Yeah,
I didn't realize that had been changed.
We had a discussion about this, about how most districts are would take that time to prepare for the to prepare and take a bit of a break, but also to prepare.
Yeah, an August break. Okay. But maybe we need to meet on the 5th instead of the 12th. That way we have time to talk this over some more. And yet, I mean, the 5th is even kind of late. I understand certainly what Dr. Birdsong is saying, but certainly we know the 12th is too late. So going to be add one other one to August or to July, or move at least the August meeting down to the 5th. It would seem to me would be logical, because we do need to get a vote done, but I don't think I'm ready to vote tonight. I may, if the majority of the board certainly wants to do that, I can do that, but I would like to have a little think time and then a little more discussion and then vote.
Yeah,
I'm not sure where everybody else is on that.
Yeah, so let's go around. Let me start with the pediatrician in the room, Dr. Gabriel. Can you give me an idea of where you're leaning at this time?
This is quite a complex decision, and of course, the American Academy of Pediatrics has put out a position statement. Our own Norfolk Council of PTA has also put out a position statement that is in unison with the Virginia PTA Association. But from a pediatric perspective, what I will share is that there is a tremendous amount of concern about the welfare of children who are not in school, and the gaps that will be exponentially increased potentially by an absence of services, and then what is going on in the home life, because as we all are very familiar with, not every household has a two-parent household, and someone can be providing the care for the child. So if they're going to be going to daycare, what are the risks and educational opportunities that are going to be provided to them? So I say that to say that that's what the American Academy of Pediatrics says. And so, however, what I'm hearing from Dr. Birdsong and from others is that the preparation needed in order to open schools, the more preparation you have, the better your performance. And so if we do move ahead with at least identifying a plan so that they can have something to work on, it is going to be better for the school division and the administration and teachers and staff so that they have that preparation time. And so I would say that, let's give them the opportunity to have as much planning on whatever option it is that this board is going to come together with, so that way the preparation can be done both in the mindset of parents, of pediatricians, of staff.
Okay. And do you feel like you also need more time to decide on what that option that you would be leaning toward voting on as far as opening?
Well, I would have to say that since I am, we are seeing so many positive cases right now, which is very unfortunate. Folks, please wear your masks.
Yes, mask up.
Wear your masks. This is not it's very important. I would say that if we go 100% virtual, that it would probably allow the staff the time that they need in order to provide the best possible options to students, and then it would allow families to make plans. I would always want to have kids in school. Let me just say that. I mean, having children in school, face-to-face instruction is always going to be the best option. However, safety is paramount. And, as Ms. Basine said, the death of one child, of one staff member, I don't think any of us would be able to say, okay, who are we going to sacrifice here? And that's really the question that we have. Are we going to accept a mortality level, or are we going to accept, well, we'll bring some kids in, and if some kids get permanently ill from it, or a family member dies, because we have, lots of generational family living, there's nothing wrong with that. Are we going to be able to say that as a board, we have made the best decision on behalf of our students and staff? And so I would say right now, if you were to ask me, which you all are asking me right now, I would probably recommend 100% virtual learning.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Clanton, could you share your thoughts on moving forward?
Student safety, teacher safety, the liability issues, the amount of time and minutes that it would take to, and I just think the questions even Mr. Jordan brought up, the cleaning in between, even if we were to bring students there, I'd agree. At this particular point, I think we need to give direction to the division so that they can prepare at least one plan and have options. I am in complete agreement. I've read all the studies, all these things that have come out about having kids in the classroom. However, we're in an unprecedented time and there is a pandemic that we're dealing with. And in a pandemic, we have to think about health and safety. And I want to make sure that there are kids who we can make sure that they have a place to come back to, as well as teachers. And I think that we have to put the safety of our teachers and our staff members foremost. So with that, I would say I would vote for 100% virtual. Look at other options, but put the safety first and foremost.
Thank you. Ms. Smith, are you prepared to give your opinion?
Yes. I know this is difficult. I would like more information, but if we had to make a decision today, I'm leaning more towards the 100% virtual. I feel that the safety, as I said earlier, of anyone who walks through the doors of our schools, administration building, facilities, those people, their safety and health has to be at the forefront.
Thank you. And Ms. Vecine, you had already said virtual first, so is that still your case?
Yes, I am fully in support of 100% virtual right now. And as Dr. Gabriel says, I don't think any one of us disagrees with the fact that our children would be best in school for their well-being and their development. But safety of our students and our staff has to come first at this moment in time, and to give Dr. Birdsong the ample opportunity to, and her team, of course, to have a strong program in place. So I'm 100% in for virtual only come fall.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Campson, I'm going to circle back to you in case you have something more to say or you've changed your mind.
Well, could I get one more clarification just to be sure that because I know Dr. Paul was saying that there is a plan in place for our most vulnerable students, special needs students, ESL students, and our K-3 children who are in developmental reading. If we choose the virtual option, that still will kick in. Is that correct?
There will be a plan in place based on the conversation tonight, but we know no matter what, we need to serve our most vulnerable students at the highest level. So if there's a decision tonight, we'll be able to put a plan in place stronger to support those students.
So they'll get face-to-face, our developmental reading children and the other two groups.
Ms. Campson, remember, during certain phases, you can't have in person. If we're in the appropriate phase to do so, yes.
If the governor drops us back to phase 2, I understand, but if it's possible, that'll be there.
Correct.
My only other thought is, it just seems like it would be good to have, because we don't know, we have another month and a half before school starts. We don't know if this may slide back down like it did last time or explode at this point. Would it be good to look at one of the other plans so that they could be some more forward work on it, even if we go virtual with special compensation for our 3 groups that we've talked about, Dr. Birdsong, or is it if we go virtual, we leave the other plans behind? What we need to, because they may be the new phase-in plans if we go all virtual as the situation improves somewhere this year, hopefully.
Yeah, and that's why I made the comment, Ms. Campson, that we really need to pay very close attention to our local data and what's going on, and we need to be flexible, because it may not, we may not need to wait a whole semester to implement another plan. We just have to make decisions in collaboration with the health experts, and be prepared, to implement a new plan as, that would meet the needs of our kids.
so that we would know if we go all virtual and we're ready to start, we'll have something to phase in, one of the plans to phase in. I doubt if we'll go from virtual to 100% in school, you know, from day to day.
Okay, I'm gonna, Ms. Smith.
I just want to say I agree with the line of thinking that Ms. Campson is sharing, that as soon as possible, beginning the phasing in of our most vulnerable group.
Yes, yes.
Mr. Jordan, are you prepared to share your opinion on this?
I'm prepared to share my opinion, sure. I'm not clear on our definition of most vulnerable, and I don't yet have sufficient data to say whatever that definition is, how many students we're talking about. You know, it's one thing to talk about, and I agree with Ms. Campson, is what I'm trying to say. I think it's one thing to say certain categories that we describe. And I also understand what Ms. Campson is saying in terms of K3 and those that need reading. But I've also read plenty of research that shows that there are much more varied demographic of students that would benefit from some in-person instruction. And I think we should know what that looks like for Norfolk Public Schools in making this decision. So my preference is to vote next Wednesday after we've had I think we should have a special call meeting next Wednesday and vote then when we have the additional information. But my sense is, as I said earlier, I think we should prepare for 100% virtual. But I would still like to hear and see some additional demographic data on where our students are. What students do we think would do better academically in terms of some blended model, whether it's the 2-day-a-week, 3-day-a-week model that some have talked about. And then what would that look like in terms of all the safety measures that everybody has talked about? I agree 100% that safety comes first. But I also think that we need to be 100% as safe as we can while providing to our students what they need in that safe environment. And I don't feel comfortable yet to be able to say 100% virtual at this moment. But I do think it should be some option. I just don't know how to quantify and qualify it now. You know, it's the first conversation we've had on this. And there's some other questions that I would like to see answered, but I'm not prepared to say 100% virtual tonight in the absence of really hearing what that means for every child in Norfolk Public Schools.
So, I mean, I hear what you're saying. And so what I'm hearing all around though is from everyone is that virtual will be a piece, if not 100% at the start. So is that enough direction, Dr. Birdsong, for us to say, please start preparing for the virtual option, either at 100% or lower, but that at some percentage of our students would be experiencing or would be getting their education over the virtual platform.
And Ms. Martin, as part of that, can somebody explain if we do have this option where some students are able to receive things in person and others are virtual, does that put us at any risk of not providing all students with a fair and appropriate education? Are there any issues there if some are receiving 100% and some are receiving in person? That would also help me in my decision making.
And I think that was one of the reasons why we said that if, you know, in bringing, prioritizing which children to bring back in for in-person instruction, that we would certainly want to bring in our children with disabilities as one of the groups of children to bring in addition to our English language learners in addition to our pre-K3 students and what we call our GAP students, students that have demonstrated some type of learning deficiencies, or they, need some additional support. So
Right.
that is one of the major reasons we said that, because we know these children are vulnerable and would benefit better from in-person instruction.
But if we allow some students to come in, are we able to allow any child that wishes to come in? That's my question. If we just target certain groups, are we saying that anybody could come in, but specifically those groups of students? Or are we saying only those groups of students and others would not be allowed in?
I think we would need some structure. So I think we would limit it to, the groups of students I just named, our children with disabilities, our English language learners, our pre-K3 students, as well as our teachers who are recommending students that have gaps, that, they would need additional support, and they would recommend that they come in person and would benefit from that level of instruction.
Well, I would like some, I accept that, but I also think we should do some legal weighing in on that.
Mr. Cloud, would you like to provide some input, please, sir?
Well, the free appropriate public education requirement is for special education students. It doesn't apply generally. But I would say, just speaking generally, that you would have to be careful that whatever criteria you use in determining what groups might not be allowed to participate in building services, you can't obviously make that judgment on an illegal basis, like race or ethnicity, sex, or what have you. But beyond that, and the special criteria for special ed students under the ADA, I think, as long as you're taking care to be reasonable about it, you wouldn't face any legal liability over the choices.
Okay, so what I'm hearing is that Mr. Cloud, if I'm understanding that, based on the particular groups and needs of the specialty needs, unique needs of those individual groups, that would be a legal criteria to allow them into the building, and then the virtual learning for the rest of the general population of students. Is that correct?
Yes, if you're going to make, rules that will not allow certain students to have the choice to receive educational services in a building, then you would need to make them along those lines. And I'm happy to work with the administration on some sort of criteria as they develop a policy on the subject. And I would think we would want to bring it to the board also, just for the board's consideration, not necessarily needed for a vote as such.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to wrap this conversation up. We have this is only agenda item number 1, but I hope that you all feel that I've given enough time to really have a good conversation, walk away with a good sense of satisfaction in your responses. But again, I do think that I do feel comfortable, based on what I gathered from each of my colleagues, that the virtual option we need to pursue that, whether we start with it or we have it as an alternative option, or we end up needing to go to that mid-fall or whenever in the future. So Dr. Birdsong, is that enough for you today? Or
repeat that?
I would say go ahead and what I'm getting from my colleagues is that we would want to pursue the virtual curriculum option to get that in place.
So are you, I just want to be clear. So this is the option that the board is asking us to put in place and move forward for the fall.
We haven't voted.
I don't
I know that, that's why
Yeah, Jack, do we require
Final
a
option, but
vote?
I would say that that option would, it seems that that would be used in some, at some level in the fall. Or do you want to know, you want just the final option?
Again,
I'm confused.
yeah, I'm getting a little confused too. We have presented options to the board, and we would just simply, not simply, we would like to know, in what direction the board is asking the administration to go for the opening of school.
Well, the consensus that I'm hearing from most of my colleagues, it would be that we want to go virtual. As much as I would love, because a lot can change between now and September, right? But given the information we have now, it seems that the virtual route would be what we prepare for.
So the administration should begin preparing to implement a 100% virtual option online at this time.
That is what I'm hearing. The consensus of this is, do we need to vote on that?
I do think that at some point, you don't necessarily have to do it today, but I think there needs to be a vote on what the plan to proceed is going to be. And also that will also influence, because Dr. Birdsong has to file with the governor before you can move into phase 3. And that hasn't been done yet, has it, Dr. Birdsong?
No.
I wouldn't have expected it to.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I guess the question for the board is, are you going to vote now, or are you going to vote on August 12th? And are you going to have another meeting between now and August 12th to discuss it further?
Well, if we have another meeting, I definitely want to do it sooner than later. So it would be, next Wednesday may be a good option, but we'd have to have that discussion as well. So Ms. Basine real quick, and then Dr. Gabriel.
I would like another meeting.
Yeah. Well, I was just going to say, I put my hand up when I heard August 12th, because I was like, that shouldn't be on the table. That's way too
I just
late.
mentioned that because currently that's the only
Yes, I
meeting
understand.
set.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's definitely a lot of data that several of us want, including myself. I feel that we have the time to get it to inform the decision making, but, I feel strongly about making a decision about going today and then working toward, we are working toward getting all of our kids back to school. That's no doubt. This is not a permanent decision, so I think that work is ongoing. But today, I think Dr. Birdsong and her team need to know something today. We could certainly meet next week or meet July 29th to talk about some of the data points that we all want, so that we can continue to plan for an eventual, in-person reopening, or what it would look like to get students into the school building who may need, additional instructional support. But I think today, July 15th, I think we need to give some sort of direction to Dr. Birdsong.
And so I know that we would like to have a presentation and more data on where, how the, I forget, I'm trying to remember how Mr. Jordan put it, but we have to know where we are to know where we're going. So we need to know where the results of the spring learning in place
Definitely
experience.
Yeah.
But I do think
but that shouldn't preclude us from making a decision today, is what I'm saying. I want that information too, but I don't think that should preclude us from making a decision today.
Yes, that's exactly what I'm saying. Dr. Gabriel, and then Ms. Campson.
I'd like to make a motion that we direct the administration to go and prepare for 100% virtual learning for all of the information that has been presented to us, but paramount for the safety of our students and staff.
Can I get a second? Carlos, Mr. Clanton seconded. Okay, Ms. Tanner, can you put it to a vote?
Maybe more discussion on the motion.
Oh, I'm sorry, discussion. Can we have a discussion, please? Ms. Campson.
I would like
maybe to amend the motion, I don't know, but I want to make sure that it includes these three groups that we talked about still getting special face-to-face instruction unless the situation reaches the point that that becomes dangerous. We don't know now, but that needs to be in this because these children are special needs children, our English language learners, and our developmental reading children in the low primary grades. They're not going to be learning if we don't put some provision in here. And so all virtual doesn't say that we're guaranteeing we will do that unless the safety conditions deteriorate. And right now they're not at that point. So I would like, can I ask an amendment? Is that how that works?
Madam Chair, can you ask for
Or do I have to do another motion or?
Can you ask for a friendly amendment of Dr. Gabriel if she'll accept it? Then we can.
Dr. Gabriel, would you consider accepting my concerns about those three groups?
Ms. Campson, add the GAP group to that.
Well, the GAP group's more fluid. Ms. Smith, I see what you're saying, but that's, I will get into that part. But I want to know, I want these three groups in. And that makes sure that every single child in K through 3 is getting direct developmental instruction, every child.
Yeah.
Ms. Campbell, I would accept your friendly amendment for the identified groups that have been mentioned as noted.
A second.
Thank you.
Ms. Basine.
Well, I was just going to say, if we start adding all of these groups back in, and this is, like I said, the all virtual, it is just to start, and then we can see where we're going. But if we start adding all these groups, we start compromising safety of our staff who are working with these students, as well as our students who may be even at greater risk of contracting the virus because they have underlying health conditions too. So I think there's a lot to consider there. So, I mean, I'm all for it. I want us to figure out a way to support the students that need additional instructional support, but I'm worried about the definitions of some of the groups that we're saying we want to bring in.
Well, those three groups aren't just three groups that I came up with.
No, I know.
Those are the nationally recognized.
Absolutely.
Those are the nationally recognized groups. Those three groups.
I'm not.
They're identified ahead by people a lot higher up the ladder than me because they're the groups that most need that least can learn under virtual and most benefit from having some kind of face-to-face instruction.
So could we say special accommodations, maybe Dr. Birdsong? Go ahead.
So if I may, to Mrs. Basine's point, I thought what I heard was that you all were concerned about our local health data, which was the reason why we were considering the 100% option. Now we're saying certain groups of kids, it's okay to perhaps expose them to health risks. So I just want to be clear, my point that I thought the conversation that you were having was around concerns about these groups of children or children generally, all of our children having that risk of exposure and maybe wanting the administration to be prepared for 100% online, and then considering another plan to phase in certain groups of children, but to start with the 100% online. So I'm a little, I just want to be clear in your thinking around, you went from, we are concerned about the safety and security of children and staff, and then we started bringing in more and more children and staff. So I just want you to consider that piece as you're working through this issue.
Thank you. And I'm going to, Mr. Clanton, Dr. Gabriel, and then I'd like to have another motion on the floor.
So I'm thinking 100% virtual, but I want consideration to be made about planning, still at the same time, simultaneously about what Ms. Campson's talking about in those particular groups. I don't want us to lose sight of that because honestly, I want, just like Mr. Jordan said, I want additional information to come back because just because we're doing 100% virtual and things may change, things may get better and we've got another option that we can phase in. But I'm looking at it when I'm talking about Ms. Campson is that we're 100% virtual, but we're giving some consideration to those other three groups. And I'm not saying that we're looking to open up on day one. I'm looking at least have a plan in place that if we can, because you still have to, based on what Mr. Cloud said, you have to send this plan in. And if the governor shuts us down and moves us back, ain't nobody going to school.
Right.
So I think that that's still in place. I mean, I could be wrong, but that's what I thought I heard.
Yeah.
So what you're saying is 100% virtual, but have a plan in place if the health conditions allow to bring children in.
In those special groups.
Prioritize those groups.
Exactly.
As we did within our presentation.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's what I'm thinking, but I want to make sure that it's clear that Dr. Gabriel's your motion. I second. That's all.
Dr. Gabriel, I'd like to pursue this motion into a vote.
Right. Right. And so I think what we all have to be aware of and understand when we're making this motion is that we are saying 100% virtual for all students. The caveat is we are recognizing that there are subgroups of students that need extra attention. Whether that attention is virtual is where I think from a safety perspective, that's where we want them to go. However, if accommodations change down the road, which is why I have accepted Ms. Campson's friendly amendment, if accommodations down the road are allow for that person-to-person instruction, then that can happen. But I just want to be clear. We're not sacrificing any one particular group of students. It should be 100% virtual learning, but there needs to be a very cognizant awareness of the subgroups of the other groups for the exact points that Ms. Campson, Ms. Smith have mentioned. And so I just want to make sure that we are all clear on that and that there is no confusion.
Thank you. That clears it up.
Yeah.
So could we hear the amendment again? I mean, the motion again with the amendment added?
Dr. Gabriel, would you like to make the motion?
There is no amendment. I don't think.
No amendment. Yeah.
Okay, so
I thought we said we were accepting.
this is going in a little crazy.
I do think the motion needs to be repeated just for the record, so Ms. Tanner can get it into the minutes.
Please, Dr.
Exactly.
Sure, but I'm going to have to ask Mr. Clanton this because we did have a friendly amendment and there was a second to that friendly amendment. And so let me just ask Mr. Clanton, with the motion that I presented, which was I would like to direct the administration towards 100% virtual learning. That was the gist of the motion. Ms. Tanner, I'm sure, can go back and get through the video, can get the full motion. But with the friendly amendment added, what we are saying is that, well, let me stop for a second there. Mr. Clanton, can I add in the information of the friendly amendment to that motion?
Yeah, you're just adding parameters. You're not changing the entire intent.
Mm-hmm.
So you're just clarifying the additional parameters there. So you as the maker can accept it.
Right. And so I have accepted Ms. Campson's a friendly amendment to say that the additional attention is made towards the students who the administration has identified, the ESL students, the students with special needs, the K through 3 learners, for the additional guidance. I believe that's what the friendly amendment was for.
Okay.
Right.
And it was seconded.
But it is 100% virtual. That is the gist of the motion.
That's not what I heard.
Yeah, me either. I think that's.
I'm confused.
What do we hear now?
I think you go back to your original motion,
Yes.
Dr. Gabriel. Your original
Understanding that other special groups, the planning will continue because the planning is going to continue for all students.
For all students, right?
Anyways. So can we go back to the original motion?
The original motion is to direct the administration and staff to prepare for 100% virtual learning option for the fall school year, period.
There you go.
Period.
Right.
And that was seconded by Carlos. Okay. Ms. Tanner, can you put it to a vote, please?
Well, I said a discussion point.
Oh, are we doing discussion again? Okay.
Well, I didn't get a chance on the motion.
Mr. Jordan, go ahead.
I just want to clarify a couple of things. Number one, I am 100% for safety of our staff and students. Also am 100% for us providing the greatest academic opportunities that we can for all students under the conditions that we currently exist. I didn't come prepared today for a vote because I didn't know we were going to be voting today. I still think there's data that we need before we take this vote. And as Ms. Campson has identified, and Ms. Smith, and I'm joining them as well, even as we describe the students that would be receiving the special services, we haven't quantified that. And when we look at our demographics in Norfolk, that could be a quarter of our students. I mean, who knows how many that we're talking about. I'll be prepared to vote on the motion, but I again recommend that we do this at a special meeting next week. The meeting can take 15 minutes, but that we vote with the full data set that we should have available. This is the first conversation we've had on this since the pandemic. And to try to receive the data, look at the options, digest it all, and not have an opportunity to really meditate on it and then go into a vote. I just don't think that's wise. As far as I knew yesterday, the vote wasn't going to be till August 12th. Now we moved it to today. So that's my point, but I just want to be clear. I think safety is important, but I also think we need to be able to quantify and qualify what the needs are of every single child in Norfolk Public Schools, and I don't believe we have received that information yet.
I would like to also say I agree the same thing. I'd like to have to next week because I'm all for safety too. That's the main thing, safety, safety, safety. But I wasn't prepared, as I said earlier, to vote, especially if we're going all virtual without any considerations for the three nationally identified most vulnerable groups. I would like to see this go till next week. I would ask the board to give us another week. That still gives the superintendent, I know not as much time as you wanted, but still it makes us, I would feel much more comfortable with what my final vote is because I'm still torn right now.
Okay. So we have an amendment or we have a motion and we have the second, we have had discussion. I would like to give everyone, I would like for everyone to be comfortable with their decision. And I feel comfortable also calling for a special, going through the process of calling for a special meeting. I would like to have it no later than Wednesday. And so,
well, you've got a motion in a second, so you need to vote on that. But
no, we can do it. So, Madam Chair, I'd like to move to table this item.
Thank you.
And to the 22nd, and that we have a special call meeting on that date.
Thank you. Second.
Thank you.
Is anyone going to second that motion?
Yes.
Okay.
Second. Thank you.
Any other discussion?
Just thank you.
We'll put it to a vote.
Yeah.
Ms. Basine?
Well, I think before we end today, we'll have to be very clear on what information and data we want from Dr. Birdsong for next week's meeting. So I just
very unclear.
Yeah, it's unclear right now, and I too want a lot of data around this, but I think like I said, but that's I want everybody to be comfortable with this as well. So I'm willing to wait a week, but I think we have to be very clear about what we want from Dr. Birdsong and her team.
Mr. Jordan and Ms. Campson, do you feel that you can?
Not just the two of them either.
I mean, yes.
Yeah.
I mean, it's open to everyone, but the two who have identified that they'd like some more information, I'm going to start here. Do you know right now, could you tell Dr. Birdsong what data points you'd like?
Well, Ms. Martin, I know that you and I and Dr. Birdsong have a meeting scheduled for Friday.
Mm-hmm.
And so if we could ask board members to submit what additional information they need by a certain date, certain time tomorrow, we can then work with Dr. Birdsong to sort through what is really needed in terms of this decision and what is going to be needed moving forward if the board is willing to trust for us to receive that information and then let the board know what the data sets will be that we will have available for action next week.
Okay. Ms. Campson, are you in agreement with that?
I think that's a great idea.
Okay. Ms. Birdsong or Dr. Birdsong?
So we're going to receive these data requests on Friday for the staff to be prepared to present on Wednesday. Is that what you're asking us to do? I just want to be clear.
No, my suggestion was we would receive the data. We would know what the board is asking for tomorrow, so that when Ms. Martin and I meet with you on Friday, we could review that and get an understanding of, from your perspective, what it is that we can return back to the board that's going to help inform the decision versus those things that may be outside of the initial scope in terms of the vote for next week.
With the
So
29th,
after the Friday meeting, I guess I will learn the data that the board is going to be asking the administration to gather, so I can get that on Friday and be prepared to present it on Wednesday. That's my question. Is that what I'm hearing?
I think you'll get it on Thursday, but without knowing all that comes through, I imagine there's going to be some sorting process, because obviously you're not going to be able to supply. I got 1,000 pages. I know you would never be able to do all of that, but I think that some of the core questions have been around the identification of the students that would be targeted or available to access the in-person education, and the staffing and other supports that would need to be available in order to accomplish that. At least it may be others, but that has been the core topic of trying to deal with the in-person option of this initial phasing.
and is the 29th too late to have that next meeting?
Oh,
Yes.
probably.
Yes.
Probably.
Okay.
Yeah.
Could I?
Ms. Basine, did you have something to say?
Well, as I know we've talked about for I know since I've been on the board, there's a possibility that 7 data requests are going to come hit Dr. Birdsong's table come Friday for development. And again, I think we're in a different situation right now because we have a public health crisis, which is top foremost on the table. And so we do not want to have to make this decision, but here we are having to make this decision. So I think that needs to be at the forefront. So I just think that's all. I've said that.
I do fear there would be a lot of, but I mean, we'll have to come up with a way of prioritizing the data points. Dr. Gabriel?
I don't have any data requests, but I am very, I want to acknowledge what I think I'm hearing from Ms. Campson as far as the desire to make sure that, these students are being, they're identified, which I know the administration is already doing it, that there are extra efforts to make sure that they are not, falling behind, that they are staying on target. However, I just want to pose this question to the board, I'm putting on the doctor hat now. So what group are we risking? What group are we willing to risk with in-person educational services? Are we putting a risk on that group aside from whatever the needs are that they need? I think that if the administration is telling us they recognize that there are groups that need intense attention, that they are, as Ms. Campson had said, that there's, you said three identified groups. Mr. Jordan and Ms. Smith have also shared some other points. But are we going to be prepared to say, well, this group is going to be a group that we might potentially, bring together for a risk? And so that's where I'm having this concern about, how are we going to be able to choose that? And so it's just a thought, just a thought to put out there for the group to ponder. That is all.
May I just speak to that? So I just want to say again that I hear you, Dr. Gabriel. The administration presented us today with 4 options. Some of those options included in-person learning. So in-person learning is on the table based upon the options that have been presented to us. I'm not trying to send any child or any staff person into an environment that is unhealthy. My expectation was if we were to choose one of the options where students came in 2 times a week or 3 times a week, that what I heard the administration said that there would be cleaning and safety measures and all these things that we've talked about, and that decisions are ultimately going to be made based upon the public health circumstances of the moment. So even if we were to decide tomorrow that there would be some in-person options, those things may not be accessible to students based upon what the public health circumstances is at the time. What is being considered and what is being discussed is giving families that feel that those options work best for their children to choose that. So I'm just trying to get us to, and I think what Ms. Campson was point initially was trying to make sure in whatever educational environment we provide under these circumstances, that we make sure that we are preparing for the needs of all students. The conditions may dictate we will not be able to access that. This is an effort to try to make sure that we are prepared for all students to be able to access what they need to be successful until hopefully the new normal arrives. So I don't want it to be suggested in any shape, form, or fashion that there's any child that's trying to be sent off into an unsafe environment. But if I would, as a parent, felt that this is what my child needed, I want to be able to have the ability to say, based upon the options that Norfolk Public Schools has provided, I'm willing to take that risk and I'll sign that waiver form so that my child can get what my child needs.
Madam Chair, I just have to call a point of order at the strict point. There is a motion on the table to table further discussion on this until the 22nd. That is the motion, and all discussion should be germane to that. I understand that we were supposed to give clarifying instructions to the administration regarding additional information. And I just encourage us to make sure that the superintendent has that and that we get back to the motion that is on the table.
Could I just have a minute to say what I meant? I know Mr. Jordan felt he was, speaking, but what I was asking for was not exactly the same. All I was asking for was what Dr. Paul had said, was that he had something that he could start working it in. I just wanted something about that added so that I knew, even if we were still officially all virtual, that when the time was appropriate, based on your judgment, that he could start working something for the 3 groups that have nationally been identified, not all the other stuff. That was not what I was asking for. I just wanted the motion to reflect that that those things could start being eased in, so not this big thing and all this data being asked for. I already know which groups there are. We already know how many kids are in those groups. I don't see any, the burden of I didn't mean to put this huge burden on Dr. Birdsong, where she's supposed to be having her people up 24 hours a day, gathering a whole bunch of information. That was never my intention. We already know who these children are and how and then Dr. Paul already has a plan to start doing something for those children on a limited and maybe ever increasing basis that would not be every day or anything. That's all I want. I just wanted that little piece added. That's why it was like a friendly, easy amendment. It wasn't all this extra stuff. And I'm sorry for that misunderstanding that grew out of it, but that's all I was asking for. Mr. Jordan had what he was asking for, and other people wanted a lot of different data and all. I wasn't asking for any of that data because we don't need it. We already know who the kids are in each of these groups. And they're this is the nationally recognized. So I just want to clarify that wherever the board goes.
So Ms. Campson, I'm glad you did clarify that, because what I understood was that you also had more data points that would help you.
No, I've never asked for any more data points. We wouldn't need data points because we already know who these children are. Okay. I wasn't asking for the superintendent and her staff to make themselves crazy collecting a whole bunch of data at the last minute. I would never have asked that.
That's what I understood that you were, that was.
I'm sorry for the misunderstanding, but that's certainly not what I wanted because she already knows who the kids are. Dr. Pohl already knows who the kids are. He already has a plan in place for that if we go 100% virtual to do some face-to-face with these as it's safe. I certainly am all for safety. I wouldn't ask them to do anything that we judge is not going to be safe, but that he can phase people, these particularly national recognized groups. As you know, we all know why the special needs kids, we all know why ESL kids, and the K-3 kids is a developmental reading thing. You get to a point where these kids get older and you can't go back and capture what they've missed. And so when those opportunities came based on whatever he already explained when he was talking about it to me when I asked the question, I only wanted to tag that into the motion so that we made sure that that was in play. That was all.
Okay. So this is where I'm going to add to the discussion. I would like to walk away from here today giving Dr. Birdsong the direction that she needs to direct her administration for the fall. And but I also would like for the data points to be prepared and possible call for a special meeting on the 22nd. So I would like to go ahead and do a vote so that because I'm hearing actually from the majority, I'm hearing some consistency in how we'd like to move forward. So we do have the motion for to table the vote. I'm prepared to go ahead. I think that we're prepared to go ahead. I know it sounds confusing. I'm trying to give everyone, this is a very unique situation we find ourselves in. And so I was really trying to give everyone the opportunity to the full time that they needed, like I said, to be satisfied here. But I do still see this as two separate things here. We need some more data. But that data, I don't see how that impedes us from directing Dr. Birdsong to move forward with the virtual learning platform.
Okay, so we're going to vote on the motion to table and then we'll take another action, right? Is that correct?
Question? Can we call the question then?
Sure. Dr. Ms. Tanner, can you please?
This is the motion to table, correct?
Right.
This is the motion to table till the 22nd.
You broke up, Mr. Clanton. Can you say it again?
So it's a motion to table.
I said this is a motion to table to a special call meeting on the 22nd. Yes.
Can you say that again, Mr. Clanton, since this is your motion?
Okay, this is a motion to table and to have a special call meeting on the 22nd.
Okay. See?
Ms. Christine?
I can hear you.
You're muted.
Nay.
Sampson?
Yes.
I didn't hear her.
Wait.
She'd like to take, she said yes.
Okay, thank you.
What? I'm confused.
The motion is to table the vote and have a special call meeting on the 22nd.
Okay. Yes.
Okay.
Clanton?
Aye.
Gabriel?
Nay.
Jordan?
Aye.
Smith?
Aye.
Martin?
I don't know where we are with the vote yet right now, but I say nay.
3 nays.
Okay. Okay. So
So we're tabling this.
yeah, we're going to table the vote, or we're going to table giving Dr. Birdsong direction, and then I will I'll issue a special call meeting for the 22nd. And we, if you have Mr. Clanton or Mr. Jordan, you seem to be, if I'll just put it out there, if anybody would like the information that they need, like to place a request for the information they need to be able to vote on this at our special call meeting next Wednesday, then please have that to Dr. Birdsong.
No, it'll need to come to you because our protocols will require it to.
We also put some kind of limits on how much data people can ask for at the last minute, because I won't be asking for any. I mean, and I know people do, but we can't just dump a whole pile of stuff on Dr. Birdsong. They are trying to get ready for everything else. And I never meant for that to be what's happening, because I know that she can't, they would have to drop everything and spend the entire next week getting data ready if we dump a truckload of data requests on them. And I think their protocol says that she can make some decisions about how much she can do anyway.
Okay. All right, thank you. Moving on to our next item, we have the approval of our June and I think our June minutes for June 3rd and June 17th.
Yes, so Madam Chair.
Yes.
I'd like to dispense with the approval of the June 17th minutes and for us to approve the June 3rd. It's brought to my attention, and after reviewing the video of the meeting, there was not an appropriate motion and a second. We did take an affirmative vote. It was a 5-2 regarding the credits, the certified credits. It is my opinion that we need to do a vote. And I understand that a colleague would like additional information, but it is to ratify the decision that occurred on the 17th. And I want to be able to provide that additional information. So I'm asking that we dispense with the approval of the June 17th meeting minutes and that we approve the June 3rd. So I'd like to move to approve the June 3rd minutes and dispense with the June 17th.
Okay, do I have a second?
Second.
Okay. Please call the roll, Ms. Tanner. Oh, I'm sorry, discussion. I'm so sorry. I keep jumping the gun on that. Do we have a discussion?
I'll call the question.
Okay.
Ms. Tanner.
Basine?
Aye.
Campson?
Aye.
Clanton?
Aye.
Gabriel?
Aye.
Jordan?
Aye.
Smith?
Aye.
Martin?
Aye.
Madam Chair, in the essence of, in the interest of time, I think that we've had a great deal of discussion regarding our board norms and protocols, approval of our code of ethics, as well as we did have some discussion around the calendar. I don't know if I can kind of see it's nod of my colleague's head here, but without objection, I would ask if we could take item 2.03, 2.04, and 2.05 and vote on them as a block, if there's no objection.
Actually, we don't need to vote on 2.05.
Okay, but
So,
on 2.03 and 2.04?
that is your motion?
Second.
Discussion? Okay, call the roll, please, Ms. Tanner.
Basine?
Aye.
Campson?
Aye.
Clanton?
Aye.
Gabriel?
Aye.
Jordan?
Aye.
Smith?
Aye.
Martin?
Aye. Okay.
I'm just trying to keep things moving along.
Right.
It's time.
Okay.
I know we all got committee assignments.
Yes. So you all had assignments, and I reached out to each of you beforehand, and I got mostly okays. So is there any other discussion that we need to have about our committee assignments before moving on? Okay. All right, moving on to enter into our closed session.
Madam Chair, I move that we move into executive session.
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion before we move into closed session?
If the clerk would read the resolution.
Okay. Move that the members of the school board go into a closed session for the purposes which are set out in subsection A of section 2.2-3711 of the Virginia Freedom of Information Act as amended for A, discussion or consideration of prospective candidates for employment and the assignment, appointment, promotion, performance, demotion, salaries, disciplining, or resignation of specific officers, appointees, or employees, etc., of the Norfolk Public Schools. Pursuant to subsection 1 of the above cited code section, the subjects of this portion of the session will be the personnel docket of the day, and B, consultation with legal counsel and briefing by staff members concerning actual or probable litigation or specific legal matters requiring the provision of legal advice by counsel pursuant to subsections 7 and 8 of the above cited code section. The subjects of this portion of the session are staff and consultation with legal counsel concerning the matters identified above and advice of counsel regarding legal issues concerning the COVID-19 pandemic emergency and the division special education program. Basine?
Aye.
Campson?
Aye.
Clanton?
Aye.
Gabriel?
Aye.
Jordan?
Aye.
Smith?
Aye.
Martin?
Aye. Okay, there was a link that was sent to each of you to go into closed session. Someone want to make a motion to come out of closed
When she
meeting?
says we're ready to go live.
We're ready.
Could
I
someone make
move we come out of closed session.
Second.
discussion? Please call the vote.
Well,
Read the resolution.
Read the motion.
Oh, I'm sorry, read the resolution. Yeah.
A resolution certifying an executive meeting of the School Board of the City of Norfolk in accordance with the provisions of the Freedom of Information Act. Whereas the School Board of the City of Norfolk has convened a closed meeting on this date pursuant to an affirmative recorded vote and in accordance with the provisions of the Virginia Freedom of Information Act. And whereas Section 2.2-3712 of the Code of Virginia requires the certification of the School Board of the City of Norfolk that such closed meeting was conducted in conformity with Virginia law. Now therefore be resolved that the School Board of the City of Norfolk hereby certifies that, to the best of each member's knowledge, only public business matters lawfully exempted from open meeting requirements by Virginia law were discussed in the executive meeting to which this certification resolution applies, and only such public business matters as were identified in the motion convening the executive meeting were heard, discussed, or considered by the School Board of the City of Norfolk. Basine? You're muted.
Aye.
Okay. Campson?
Aye.
Clanton?
Aye.
Gabriel?
Aye.
Jordan?
Aye.
Smith?
Aye.
Martin?
Aye.
Madam Chair,
Yeah.
I'd like to move that we approve the personnel docket and supplemental dockets as presented.
Second.
Any discussion? Ms. Tanner, please call the question.
Basine?
Aye.
Campson?
Aye.
Clanton?
Aye.
Gabriel?
Aye.
Jordan?
Aye.
Smith?
Aye.
Martin?
Aye. Okay. That's it.
That's it.
So if you have any data that, as we discussed earlier, that you'd like to include for our special session next Wednesday, please send an email to me as early as tomorrow as possible to give enough time for consideration, and also look for the notice of the special meeting time. I plan to just make it at 4:00 like we normally meet. So that's what you should expect. And I really truly appreciate some of the fumbles, your patience with some of my fumbles today. And I apologize for going over, but I did want to again provide enough time so that since we haven't had any discussion about the opening of schools. So I wish you all a good evening and look forward to working with you and continuing to work with you and also to seeing you next Wednesday. All right, thanks. Have a good night.